Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the May meeting of Council. Welcome to those attending virtually and also those physically present here today. Particularly warm welcome and thank you to the management team and our statutory planner, Andrew, for your presence and the work you're about to undertake on our behalf in presenting. And welcome to the GM and his assistant, Sarah. Thank you. I should notify those present that today's proceedings will be recorded and available on our website as soon as possible after the meeting, most likely tomorrow. And that's a standard practice. An unusual meeting in that we usually start with the apologies and leave of absence. I don't believe we have apologies or leave of absence. So I chose to insert a formal acknowledgement of the resignation of Councillor Summer Metzger. Now, I'll read from the notes that each of you have access to. And for those who are not aware, particularly those online, Councillor Summer Metzger recently advised councillors and staff of her resignation from council in what was an extremely difficult decision, given her passion and commitment for her community. Summer's determination to actually make a difference has been much valued and respected. She's been a vibrant member of our team for 6.5 years, and in that time has been a key contributor, not only in our deliberations, but in helping shape a shared vision for our community and the people we are elected to serve. Councillor Metzger made a passionate contribution to the committees on which she served, and her work leading the Latrobe Tree Committee and on economic development and on our Economic Development Committee in particular will leave difficult shoes to fill. No doubt, elected members will join with the management team and staff in thanking Summer for her contribution and friendship, and we wish her and her family all the very best that life has to offer as they take their next steps on life's journey. As Mayor, I certainly appreciate Summer's dedication and willingness to contribute. I very much respect her decision and the time taken to make sure she does what's best for her and her family at this point in time. I sincerely hope she will not be lost to public life and that she will continue to follow her passion for people and community when circumstances permit. Her input and her contribution around the table, the council table, will be greatly missed. Unfortunately, Summer's circumstances are not unique, but are reflective of a wider demographic who find it almost impossible to serve in local government whilst managing the competing priorities of full-time work and family commitments, all at the same time. In my view, our sector would be well served to find workable options that support and encourage participation from a broader community representation, particularly working parents with dependent children. For councillors' information, particularly, the State Electoral Office has been advised of the vacancy created by Councillor Metzger's decision and have advised that a recount will be conducted to fill that vacancy. I'm informed the outcome should be known by close of business 2nd of June 2025. And we look forward to that election, or that by-election, we look forward to that vacancy being filled and working with the new member going forward. But again, I want to capture and to acknowledge Councillor Metzger's contribution and have that formally recorded by way of that statement. Having done so, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is the declaration of pecuniary and conflicts of interest under the Local Government Act 1993, whereby as chairperson I'm required to ensure that councillors who have a pecuniary or conflict of interest in any item on the agenda have advised the General Manager of that pecuniary interest in the usual manner and will manage that conflict when the time comes during the meeting. I note we have received notice of conflict of interest from 3 councillors present. Councillor Baldock, Deputy Mayor Mead and myself have all made a declaration. I'm not aware of any others. There are none, so thank you for that. And having said that, we now move to item 3 on the agenda, which is the confirmation of minutes from the ordinary meeting held on the 28th of April 2025. The recommendation is before you, councillors. Do we have a mover and seconder to reflect that recommendation, please?
So moved.
Councillor Fiedler, thank you. And Councillor Wicks, thank you. Any comments in relation to the accuracy of those minutes, Councillor Fiedler?
Correct record.
Councillor Wicks?
As far as I can see, I agree with that.
Any other questions in relation to the accuracy of those minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is the agenda item 8, which is public participation questions on notice from the public. The questions there have been listed with the proposed responses, and we have recommendation for councillors to consider. Do we have a mover and seconder to reflect that recommendation? Councillor Wicks, thank you, and Councillor Martin, thank you. No debate, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. And those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 9 is public participation, questions about notice from the public, whereby there's an opportunity for anyone here present to pose questions to council on any council activities. Is there anyone present? Mr Redgrave, I assume. If you'll come forward, name and the items on which you wish to address council, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, James Redgrave, items on the all exposed concrete footpath and potential forthcoming flood emergency. And question 1, what's Latrobe Council's budget allocation amount for the entire wholly exposed concrete footpath as of 26th of May 25? Question 2, this week saw a 1 in 500 year record flooding on the New South Wales mid-coast that had mitigation works done after the 2021 floods. Latrobe Council has now completed the Latrobe levee and the Kings Park culvert dam. If a 1 in 500 year record flood was to hit Latrobe and surrounding areas, where is the emergency evacuation plan for a catastrophic breach of the levee and the Kings Park dam, and how do the public access this plan?
Thank you for the questions. So question 1 in relation to the budget for the entire wholly exposed concrete footpath. The response is as follows. The 2024-25 financial year annual plan and budget available on Council's website reflects a carried forward amount of $285,000 from previous financial years and a subsequent allocation of an additional $750,000, including a $500,000 grant from the Vulnerable Road Users Program, giving a total current budget allocation of $1,035,000. Further, and following the completion of the detailed design and associated technical specifications and the final approval from Parks, a further $1.4 million allocation has been included in the 2025-26 draft budget, which went out for community consultation in April. The draft budget is also available on Council's website, but is of course subject to review prior to being presented to councillors for their consideration at our June meeting. In response to question 2, that is in relation to the flood levy and the terrible flooding that's currently impacting New South Wales and referred to in the question, the response is as follows. Under the Tasmanian Emergency Management Arrangements, local government is not the lead agency for flood evacuation. In Tasmania, the SES are the advisory and management authority for riverine flooding and have the associated legislative powers, along with Tasmania Police, to order evacuation with council assisting within its capability at that particular time. Further requests for information relating to emergency management, or should I say riverine flooding more appropriately, should be directed to regional or state representatives of the Tasmanian State Emergency Service. Thank you for the questions. Next item on our agenda, councillors, is item 10, where, in accordance with clause 25(1) of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulations 2015, the chairperson is required to advise that council will now act as a planning authority. And in that capacity, we will initially deal with item 10.1, which is a development application at 17 Squeaking Point Esplanade, Squeaking Point. The report author was our statutory planner, Caleb Ball, who is unable to attend tonight's meeting, and Andrew will present in his absence. But before we do, can we have a mover and a seconder to reflect the recommendation relating to that item, please?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simms. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Simms, I'm assuming you're happy to hand over to Andrew to present.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Good evening, everyone. Through the chair, if I may, given the motion that's just been passed, there is a correction I would like to propose in terms of one of the conditions, and I'll provide a bit of a reasoning as to why I believe that as we as a planning authority should alter the condition. So within the recommendation, condition 7, which relates to soil and erosion control, condition reads, site-specific soil and water management plan is to be provided with a plumbing application and installed prior to the site preparation for building construction works. Silt fencing, other devices to be provided during construction when necessary to control the loss of silt, gravel, clay and soil from the site to protect the road. I would like to propose that this condition be amended to read, to be provided to the manager, development and regulatory services and installed prior to site preparation. So to remove the bit concerning the plumbing application.
Okay.
The reason being, we have within this application 4 outbuildings proposed. The majority of those outbuildings would classify as low risk building and plumbing work. They would not require a plumbing application to be submitted. So there's the potential for those 3 to be built prior to actually, so potential for an issue to actually occur. So I believe that actually you should require those conditions, those soil and water management conditions to be installed.
The intent's understood. Are the mover and seconder happy with that change? Thank you both. Thank you, Andrew, for that. And hopefully Sarah can, capture that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
So to speak to the report, just briefly, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, Caleb Hawke has provided the assessment for councillors for your consideration this evening. The application is for proposals for 4 outbuildings associated with the existing residential use approved on the site, 17 Squeaking Point Esplanade, the Squeaking Point. The reason why the application is before us this evening, there are 2 expressions within the planning scheme where proposed development does not comply with acceptable solutions. Clause 11.4.2 concerns the development proposed is within the 20-metre frontage setback that's applicable within the rural living zone. And clause 11.4.2 P3 is variation to the permitted side boundary setbacks of 10 metres. Now, noting this site is considerably smaller than the majority of sites that we would typically find within the rural living zone, within the Tasmanian planning scheme framework that we have to work with, you couldn't really find a zone that would best suit these type of legacy lots that exist out in Squeaking Point, which are typically very small in area, size, and all unserviced. Saying that, there are the discretions that are triggered with this application. There were representations received as part of this assessment. I trust that those have been forwarded to you councillors prior to tonight's meeting, and Caleb has also made reference to those within the report. We've got any questions or queries concerning this application?
Thanks, Andrew. I'll ask the mover and seconder first and then open it up for questions from the remaining councillors. Councillor Simms.
I endorse the approvals meet the Building Act and I don't have any problem with it.
Thank you, councillor. Okay. Councillors around the table, where do we start? Deputy Mayor Mead, happy to lead off.
I will say that I'm extremely uncomfortable with this application, and there are obvious concerns which have been set out with regard to the representations as well. I note that it's a very small site in comparison to the other sites in the local area, and it's why I suggest that the boundary setbacks or a reduction in any boundary setback is unreasonable with what is already, I've lost the correct words at the moment, but is the amenity of the area, I think, is lost when it comes to encroaching on boundary setbacks in that location. It does. I have a great concern with regard to that. Obviously, we know that we can navigate the challenges around plumbing and the usage of the site with regard to environmental systems. But once again, that's not until there's a problem that's noted. So that is a concern to me, but I understand our restraints around how we actually can work with that at this stage. But I do have significant concerns with this DA.
Okay, thank you. Questions elsewhere? Nope. Then I might add to those concerns, and they certainly, unfortunately, don't and can't impact my decision in relation to the DA. But I think it's important for the record that it be noted that the site already is problematic. That the DA comes to us because of a non-compliance raised from within community, number one. Secondly, the representations from the three representors all identify non-compliance issues, even in relation to the DA we're considering tonight. For example, they suggest, or not suggest, they're very clear, that there is a toilet and a breather pipe already attached to the bus, which isn't something we can consider tonight, unfortunately. And again, they also suggest that the building works on those 4 outbuildings has already commenced, which is contrary to the conditions imposed or intended to be imposed by approval of the permit tonight. Likewise, the construction of those outbuildings prevent the bus being taken from the site by the only exit from that site, the driveway. The bus cannot fit between the buildings and get to the driveway. Physically, it can't, on the dimensions provided by the applicant. So, and that's only just touching on the service in terms of compliance issues. And in approving this tonight, should we do that, we're going to create significant compliance issues and workload for the team. But again, I stress the issues I'm talking about and identifying, most of you would have already considered, no doubt. And like me and now been made aware that there's no way we can consider those in terms of the planning scheme. So we have before us an application. We need to decide in terms of planning guidelines and regulations, how we proceed. Again, I note the concern of not only the Deputy Mayor, I'm sure other councillors around the compliance issues, not only current, but that will be associated with DA. Andrew, you might like to comment, but please, happy if you don't. You might even want to refute what I just said.
Certainly not going to refute the comments that have been offered. Ultimately, I guess, in terms of where we sit as a planning authority, we need to consider the development applications before us. We need to be very careful that we don't draw in other issues that are, however they're being brought to our attention, and try to deal with those, such as additional development.
Yeah.
If there are any aspects of those concerns that you wanted to ask any queries on, just to get some further clarification, I'm happy to provide answers where I can.
I understand that. My point of raising is more so not for the councillors, because I understand those concerns are somewhat shared, but more so for those people listening in or who might be reflecting on council's role as a planning authority, as distinct from representing the broader public, and how those two roles are completely separate, even between the planning authority and the other work that Jan's department does in terms of compliance. They are completely separate and need to be viewed that way. But Council has to consider the application in terms of the planning scheme. That's what we'll do tonight. I am assured. I can assure those who are listening in. But again, it is a frustration that is shared by not only those representatives, but councillors as well. Having said that, unless there's any other questions directly relating to the planning scheme, Councillor Martin.
Just wanted to, the point that you raised about the bus, wasn't a condition that the bus remain registered and able to be put onto the road, but if you can't get it onto the road, how? Because of the buildings, I'm sorry, and I'll probably say it's a plank, but that just...
Question's valid, and I've already discussed it with Andrew. And Andrew, if you provide that response for the record.
You respond, because I think this is a key element for consideration. So obviously condition 3, every condition 3 I think it was for concerns the bus, yes, it's a registrable vehicle. The wording of that is derived from Director of Building Control, so Consumer Building Occupational Services, that is the state regulatory arm that deal with the building regulations. They have previously issued directions concerning registrable vehicles such as caravans, tiny homes, buses and the like that are used for residential purposes. The key determination within that is that it is a registrable vehicle. Keyword is registrable, able, not registered. If it is a registrable vehicle, then it does not require building and plumbing approvals under the requirements of the Building Act 2016. That doesn't take away the need that it may require planning approval. And in this case, the residential use is already established. It's a no permit required use on this site, so planning is also taken care of. But if it is a registrable vehicle, then it doesn't require building and plumbing approvals. What are some of the things that can trigger that changing? One of the key things, which is what is discussed in the condition, is if that vehicle is plumbed in, i.e. it is permanently tethered to the ground through a plumbing system. You cannot physically register that vehicle by virtue of the fact it's connected to the ground. So it's the same whether it's a caravan, tiny home, bus, whatever it is. If it's connected to the ground, permanently tethered at that point in time, it's considered under the National Construction Code and the building that. As to how far you extend that in terms of registrable, I acknowledge the fact that Sabao would effectively become landlocked in the site and not able to be driven out to the road, not without destroying some structures that may be in its path. But the key term is not that it can get to the road, it is registrable. That is the key word that we need to consider as part of this. Obviously, there are concerns and constraints with that. Fully understand that and acknowledge those. But that's why that condition is in there, to fully make that clear and explicit, which I believe that as a planning authority, we have appropriate discretion. It's a fair and reasonable condition to impose on this permit. And as Mr. Mayor rightly pointed out, there are still other matters, other approvals under the Building Act through plumbing and building approvals that need to be considered next stage. Developed. Obviously, we're not considering those as a planning authority tonight. Does that help answer some of the...
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Andrew's response also raises another question, that is the tethering of the vehicle, which is raised in the representations, and they've representatives are clear that there's currently a toilet plumbed into the bus and a breather pipe attached to the bus. And again, when I raise that outside the meeting, again, that's not something we can consider as part of tonight's DA. That is a compliance issue and will be dealt with as such. So again, there's so much almost contradictory within this DA. But again, trying to sort out the compliance from the planning, I've had great difficulty with, as I'm sure you guys have had too. But again, the report is, as presented, does cover off all those things that's required to under the planning scheme and regulations. And yeah, so many questions, but again, a pass the work for the compliance team. Should this be approved tonight? Councillor Baldock.
I will actually abstain from the vote in that one, but am I still allowed to ask the question? There's 4 outbuildings. One of them is an amenities block, and one of the conditions, if I make that right, is that those outbuildings are actually not there to be lived in. So why is there an amenities block?
The amenities block would be, to, as I understand, to service requirements for a resident who wishes to reside in the bus. So now it's not uncommon for council as a planning authority to consider amenities within sheds. It's fairly common actually. Traditional, you would more reasonably expect that to be a shed associated with a residence that's on the site, but there's nothing within the conditions to stop us from considering amenities within our.
Councillor Brown.
I'm a bit concerned here where it says the registered vehicle. And when you read it here, and you said to me that there is that piped into the storage. And it says on here, all black water is to be contained in a self-contained vehicle. Water must not be disposed of on site. Right? It says it in there. And the vehicle to be run self-contained must not be plumbed into any infrastructure on site.
Yeah,
So isn't that?
it's a compliance issue rather than a planning issue, Graham. And this is where the water is muddied somewhat. Again, it's in the report and it is a compliance issue and it will be addressed by the team. But again, it can't be considered in terms of our deliberations under the planning scheme.
If I may, to provide, so in addition to Councillor Brown's question, so for what I mentioned to Councillor Martin before about the registered vehicle and how that meets Director of Building Control's direction, if a tiny home, caravan or a bus is fully self-contained, i.e. it's not connected to the ground, but it has water storage and its own wastewater tank associated with that, as you would find such a motorhome, caravan and the like, that's still okay. It's a registered vehicle, it doesn't impact on the ground itself. So that fits within the exemption for building approvals. Now, obviously not to speak on behalf of the compliance department, but to further reiterate, I guess, the concerns for non-compliance. If a matter is formally brought to our attention, investigations undertaken, and it's deemed that that bus is connected to a wastewater system, has had plumbing work and therefore would require plumbing approvals to be undertaken and relevant building approvals, normal course of action would be that a notice would be issued to that landlord owner saying to them, this is what has been identified, what are you going to do about it? What they would most probably say they would do is, well, okay, that would be decommissioned and a separate standalone wastewater or amenities block would be built, in that case to be compliant to the regulations. So this is where, I guess, ultimately, and in terms of that, we would say, well, okay, we've issued a permit that's approving this tonight. Should this permit be approved, they're going to consider, okay, yes, the notice could be issued, but that's effectively telling them to seek approvals for what they've already done. So it's here tonight. And this is the complexity that we have, where we have an application that is proposing something that we're required to legally consider here tonight, plus things that I understand that have been brought to the attention of mayor and councillors that are outside of this process.
I think 2 or 3 more comments from me before we go to a vote. One, reflecting on Councillor Baldock's determination to abstain from the vote, I would advise all councillors that to abstain from a vote in local government is to vote against the motion. Should the majority of councillors present vote either no, that is not to support the motion, or abstain, the motion will be lost and you will need planning reasons for those who vote against it to validate your vote. And should you not be able to provide those, then the decision would be no doubt appealed and council would wear, history would tell us, council would wear the cost of that appeal. In response to Councillor Brown's question, which I won't repeat, we are here to act in this capacity as a planning authority only. We cannot consider compliance matters and we can frown and be concerned about those things, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge we have dual roles, one as a planning authority and one as a council. They are 2 completely separate functions and we need to reflect, our vote needs to reflect those separate roles. So please be aware of those responsibilities. I know you're aware. It's just up to me as the chair to remind you. But again, I am conscious of the potential of multiple abstentions and those voting against the motion combined leading to a loss of the motion and the implication in that for council. I'm not trying to influence your vote in any way, just reminding you of your obligations. Having said that, I'm not sure if the General Manager wants to add anything. No. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Sorry, Councillor Brown.
So what you're saying, if we abstain from voting or vote against it, it still goes through?
If the majority abstain from voting or vote against the motion will be lost, the permit won't be issued, and then more than likely that there would be an appeal by the proponent, given there are no grounds to reject the application on a planning basis. And if that appeal is successful, then history would suggest that the cost would be awarded against council. Jan's nodding in agreement. So again, making you aware of the risks, and we've been through this before, where council has had costs awarded against it.
No situation.
Absolutely, potentially, you may describe it that way. But again, I need to make that clarification for you.
If I might have one more question.
Certainly, Deputy Mayor Mead.
Andrew, thank you. I just wanted to seek clarification again with regard to the setbacks. The paragraph says the size and orientation of the subject site make meeting the requirement frontage setback distance difficult to achieve. The proposed development has the barbecue area attached to the northwest corner of the dwelling and the remainder located between the dwelling and the western boundary. The proposed development is located further from the frontage boundary than the existing. So what I'm hearing is the setbacks are all within an approved building lot. The new development is asking for the adjustments in setback, which is outside what's reasonable amenity of that area. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't believe that this fits well enough within the discretions for me to vote for it.
So to provide clarification on what we're discussing. So acceptable solution states that buildings must be set back 20 metres from a road frontage. No issues, no, that's what it's got to be. In this case, we already have buildings closer to 20 metres. Other zones might have wording in there to the effect that no further forward than the building line. You might think from a visual impact perspective, well, if the building's already, say, 5 metres from the road frontage, the other building's going to come up to 5, there might be a little insignificant difference in relation to that. But in this case, no, any development within 20 metres, regardless of what's there or not, needs to go through that discretion. And the key driver for that performance criteria is that the development that's proposed, not what's existing and legally established, what's proposed, must be cited to be compatible with the character of the area, having regard to those 5 subpoints. The character of the area, obviously, from what we discussed here tonight, is a very nuanced example because this area of Squeaking Point, historically, much smaller lot sizes, a lot more vegetation cover, and where sites where it's practically impossible to meet those setback distances given those small lot sizes as well. So this is really where you need to take each application on a case-by-case basis. And you need to look at the surrounding lots and go, okay, what are their setback distances? What is the character of that development? What is the character of that area? Is it going to fit broadly within the character of that? So it's not a definitive yes or no answer. You've got to look into it in detail. And I think councillors were aware of that because we've been discussing that tonight. I guess ultimately that in terms of, as Mr Mayor foreshadowed before, that if the motion was to be lost, any alternate motion would obviously need to consider the requirements of the planning scheme. Obviously those 2 clauses that are discretionary, hence why the application's here tonight, they would be the ones that would need to be considered. There needs to be an alternative motion to be discussed by the planning authority. But certainly, as I said, it's certainly having regard to that performance criteria and really reading those words to understand exactly what it is after and what those instructions are within that performance criteria is really, really important, especially with a complex application like this one.
This is complex. before we go to Councillor Brown, I'll ask another question then. And I'm trying to provide some clarity as best I can. In terms of P3, clause 11.4.2, Andrew, there's reduction in setback to the western boundary from 10 metres to 1.5. So a significant reduction in the setback there. Given the report, Caleb's recommendations, is that to suggest that that reduction in setback is consistent with similar or joining properties or properties in the adjacent area?
So when you look at a variation to a side bound setback, you can be tempted to compare that with the acceptable solution, like a sliding scale. If you say the acceptable solution, 1.5, no, you can't, that's too far. That's not the test. You either meet the 10 metres or you don't. As soon as you don't meet the 10 metres, you disregard what that acceptable solution says, because that's not what you're assessing anymore. Performance criteria then is that criteria for the assessment. The key test within that is that the buildings must not cause an unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties. What could cause that unreasonable loss of amenity? Well, maybe the topography of the site could have an impact on why those buildings need to be there. Size, shape of that site, setbacks of surrounding buildings, i.e. what's established in the area, height, bulk, form of existing and proposed buildings. So that's looking at not only what's proposed, but what you've got actually around. Character, development on established properties in the area, overshadowing. There's quite a broad range of things to consider within that, and Caleb has actually gone through each sub-point to provide responses to those as well. So it's fully encapsulated within that report as considered characteristics of that site. But again, with anything in the planning scheme, I think we'd be aware, rules need to be interpreted in order to be applied. And that's where this performance criteria is very much case by case. It's the understanding you were sitting here as a planning authority tonight, you're making the determination.
And in terms of amenity, when you look at the photographs provided in the report, you'll see that it would seem that the property owners have taken steps to prevent the impact on amenity by putting in relatively high fences, so they don't have to experience that loss of amenity. Again, this doesn't necessarily help in the assessment of a loss of amenity. Again, it's almost chicken and egg type scenarios. But we have what we have. Councillor Brown, I know you had another question, or maybe not.
Not really. I mean, for us to vote against this, we must have a planning reason. And not being a planner, and it's been recommended by the planner, I don't have any choice. And that's something that I disagree with, but we don't have any choice.
Now, if I may say, the report has been authored by Caleb. Again, it's not here tonight. Ordinarily, if I had the planners is to present an item, it's not professionally reasonable for that same planner to then discuss what an alternative motion might look like. In this case, I've not authored the report. I would not have a professional conflict in providing any other planning advice concerning this. However, as Mr. Mayor rightly pointed out, we need to be very aware of what those planning grounds may be.
Difficult space. Unless there are any more questions, I do have to put the motion. But you can seek clarity beforehand if you want further clarity from either our statutory planner or Jan. Again, at some point we have to put the motion and have a vote based on information provided and the scheme guidelines and regulations associated with the assessment of development applications. So, having said that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
I don't have a choice.
Okay. Can we have a count of hands, please? That'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I'm sorry. For the record, Councillor Wicks, Councillor Brown, Councillor Sims, Councillor Martin, Councillor Feather, Councillor Freshney have voted for the motion. Those against? Against the motion is Deputy Mayor Mead, and abstaining from the vote, I believe, Councillor Border. So the motion is therefore carried 6-2. Thank you all for dealing with a difficult agenda item, made more difficult by the non-compliance issues that brought it to our attention at the start. But again, our team are trying to do their best to manage that non-compliance, and will continue to work through the issues with the property owner. And I thank Jan and the team for their work thus far. Right, having dealt somewhat with that DA, we'll move to the next item. Sorry, apologies. Before we deal with the next item, Deputy Mayor Mead has declared interest and will leave the meeting.
That's the Burgess one, is it?
And Councillor Bordock as well. Okay, in this case, we're doing agenda item 10.2, a development application, lot 19 Burgess Drive. The report author is Statutory Planner Andrew Newton. We have some recommendations there which are quite significant in terms of the red writing and the suggested changes or amendments, including to endorse plans, the bushfire hazard management, the Part 5 agreements in relation to bushfire management areas, and the covenants to be applied to the site. Do we have a mover and a second in relation to, to reflect the recommendation, please? Councillor Martin, thank you, and Councillor Sims. Councillor Martin, I assume, happy to?
Very happy to hand it over to Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this one, again, we'll remember, councillors, back in February, we considered this application for 75 lot subdivision, roads and the associated infrastructure. There were conditions of approval as part of that permit, that required amendments to the design, amended plans, documentation to be submitted. So the applicant is at that point where a lot of those plans documentation is ready, and that's come before you tonight. They've also sought opportunity to seek a minor amendment to the permit. And this is the main component of this report, is to consider that minor amendment. There's also the matter of covenants. Now, normally covenants are not a matter that council enters into. Covenants normally are effectively a legal agreement entered into between the relevant landowner, developer, and any prospective purchasers of that land. Now, council in recent times has enforced conditions on any subdivision permit, requiring that any covenants come before council in the first instance, and that's to make sure that there's no major inconsistencies between what's stipulated in the covenant and what's in the planning scheme. Because we ideally do not want any inconsistencies between what's on a covenant on someone's certificate of title versus what the statutory and regulatory rules and regulations are under our planning scheme. So you'll note on the recommendation that condition 20 is proposed to be amended with a sub-point there concerning lots that could be developed for multiple dwelling development. I want to have a good conversation with you tonight as briefly as I can, because this is one that can, cross within the strategic direction for land use and development. So we need to consider that carefully. And that condition may potentially be changed depending on the discussions that we have here tonight. Now, the applicant forwarded to council recently an amended covenant document with some additional lots that they would like to propose that could be developed for multiple dwelling development. They were emailed to you today, councillors, so they should be available within your documents. If not, please let us know. I have a hard copy here that you can view should you wish to do so. But briefly, in terms of covenants, we need to be aware that this is general residential zoned land. It is fully serviced. We need to make the best use available of that land. So if we're talking about restrictions to further subdivision or further units, we need to be very careful about that. Because certainly there are some lots within this proposed subdivision that could hypothetically be further subdivided or facilitate unit development. So the recommendation I stated, I went through the lots that could service units or could potentially service subdivision. There were questions concerning bushfire requirements for those lots and infrastructure. However, with the revised documentation that was been forwarded through to you this morning, there are some additional lots that could potentially service unit developments. So I would like us to consider that. If we're happy to consider those additional lots to be included within that mix, then we can consider that. By all means as well, if we're not comfortable at all in having covenants and we want to have that developer ability to apply for unit development, then we would have this discretion to consider that as part of this permit as well. Notwithstanding that, there are some of these lots that physically could not able to be subdivided or developed for unit development because they are on that smaller side. So that's just in relation to covenants. I just want to put that out there for you to mull over while I go over the other points briefly.
Andrew, do you mind if we deal with the covenants first? You know, if there are any questions or clarification, because I think councils would have a general appreciation that covenants are dealt with in courts basically, and takes the developer in this instance to, I guess, to go to court to make sure that they are upheld should they wish to do so. But having said that, the information provided today, that is with the, and I hope I'm looking at correct information, they've identified the current lots which are potentially for multiple developments, and then again used a different colour, pink in this instance, to identify additional potential multi-development units. Each of those is on a corner block, which generally lends themselves to being multi-units with dual access or single access to each of the units thereon. And the final one, the one that's not on a corner block, is an internal block or battle axe block of over 900 square metres, which again, size-wise, lends itself to potential unit development. So I guess there's that clarity. And personally, I don't have any issue with the further identification or location of those multi-development, proposed possible multi-development lots. I'm not sure if the councils want to discuss anything further about the covenants, but again, we've had these before and they aren't necessarily abided by in the planning scheme and can't be enforced by the planning scheme, but again, it's an awareness that they aren't or are inconsistent with the planning scheme as far as council is concerned. Is there any questions in relation to the covenants? Gary?
Yeah, I'll just.
Councillor Sims, I should say.
Number two, with the fences, can you explain that a bit better?
Yes, I understand that Chromie developments often have covenants that restrict front fences from being built on properties. It's largely, as I understand, for the visual aesthetic of these subdivisions. They're looking for a particular look and a particular feel. But remember that they are marketing these products. They're marketing these lots
Still put a fence up.
in certain circumstances. And this is where
We keep the kids in.
so in certain circumstances. So this is where, in terms of a front yard, so where in terms of a front yard, the developer wishes to pursue a streetscape that is not dominated by frontage fences. Notwithstanding, you've still got, most of these properties would have the ability to provide private open space in their rear yards.
Yeah.
The covenants do say that if you have a corner block, obviously then you've got two frontages to deal with, and your backyard effectively still might front a road. They've stipulated that as an example, and they've said, okay, yes, you can provide a fence in that situation. And that fence requirement there is consistent with the planning scheme requirements, which I've noted in the report. So, but this is something that prospective purchasers need to be aware of when they're looking to purchase land. They need to obviously do their due diligence and think, well, okay, yes, there's covenants out here. Is that a best fit for me? If having a front fence for them is a non-negotiable and they want to fence and utilise that, perhaps they might need to look at another land parcel that doesn't have those covenants in place. Does that assist? Yeah.
I also suggest that covenant, a particular covenant, is consistent with our planning principles. That is where we're trying to achieve a better aesthetic to the finished product once the houses and whatnot are built, a greener approach to our subdivisions than has previously been the case. So I'd suggest that's probably, again, aligned to that planning principle or that intent. But yeah, thank you for that. Happy to move on if there's no questions around covenants.
Great, thank you. And just to briefly to summarise in terms of those points, so lots 2 and 29, which are both corner blocks, as Mr Mayor pointed out, they have more north-south orientation, so there's increased risk of those southern units being overshadowed. But again, provided they're designed well, that it could be mitigated as part of the design for a unit. Given their small lot sizes, they're probably not going to be conducive to having 2 3-bedroom units on that site. It's probably a little bit small for that, but 2 bedrooms, yeah, that could probably work.
All of which would be dealt with the DA by the person or people who purchased that block.
Yep, that's exactly right. Lot 26 I didn't consider because I thought that's right on the edge of that bushfire prone area. However, the pink dot on that plan indicates that the developer is confident that units could be developed on that site. So with that confidence in mind, I'm happy to consider that. So with that in mind, if we were to accept these as they are, I don't believe we would require the additional point for condition 20 to be incorporated. So that point C on condition 20 was additional to what we were originally considering. However, if we as a planning authority are happy to consider this revised plan that we have here tonight, the one that was forwarded through this morning, we can obviously provide that written confirmation back to the developer and accept that plan as is, without having to have that additional condition as part of condition 20. Does that make sense, councillors, before moving on?
Okay.
Okay. So really working from bottom to top then. So bushfire report. The adjoining land parcel to this subdivision to the east in Burgess Drive is just over 1 hectare in size, which is council-owned land. So the developer is seeking amendment to the conditions of approval, requiring it to enter into agreement with council for the hazard mitigation for that block. The reason being is that this land parcel being the size that it is and undeveloped at this point in time, as well as adjoining other land to the northwest of it that is also undeveloped at this point in time, would potentially pose risk of bushfire. So having the management area adjacent to lots 63 to 67 and lot 75 would assist in the provision of the development of dwellings on those lots until such time as the subdivision is further developed and that bushfire risk is therefore mitigated. So that's in relation to effectively amending the condition. So that condition already requires agreements on some of the other adjoining land titles, given the bushfire risk that they pose. So to clarify, the developer is seeking endorsement that council would enter into agreement with the developer for the hazard mitigation of that lot.
That's maintaining that block of land in a state which will mitigate the risk of bushfire, which we should be maintaining the block of land in that sort of state anyway.
Right. Yep.
Okay, that's simply in a nutshell, isn't it? It's that maintenance of that land.
Yep.
Okay. Next.
Next ones. So the next ones concern amended plan conditions. So condition 16 was about the electricity substation. So condition 6, so the substation was originally proposed on the corner of what would be Pink Street and the small cul-de-sac in the northwestern portion of the site. And that substation in that original location would be fairly obvious. And these are things that you cannot screen or try and hide. They need to have manageable area around them so Tas Networks can get to them, maintain them. Obviously, high voltage electricity goes without saying. But it would be very prominent on that corner, especially with the shared pathway that's proposed adjacent to Pink Street as well. So we had a condition that said, well, we don't consent to that location. We will need to look at other alternatives. Developers negotiated with Tas Networks. Tas Networks basically said, well, we really like that location because it's pretty much close to the very middle of the site. It's ideal for electricity infrastructure, right in the middle of the site. But what they've been able to do is push that a little bit further up that side road, which would minimise the visual impact from Pink Street. And again, given the orientation and the trajectory of that road, they would also minimise that visual impact as well, moving it back from the corner up a little bit. Means lot 70's boundary would need to be adjusted slightly to accommodate that. But I think that this would be a good outcome, especially if Tas Networks have said, no, that's an ideal location. I think happy to consider that. And finally, if I may, Mr Mayor, I'll go to the next one amendment, which was requiring the provision of a road link to the adjoining land, as we know as the Dorling land, to the west. Obviously, we've identified that land can be developed to suburban density, effectively general residential zone. It's able to be fully serviced. It would be remiss of us not to pursue this road link now to get that connected through. So that road link has been provided between lots 13 and 14 as specified. Now, the developer has opted not to do away with one lot to get that road through, but has tightened up lots 14 to 26, so pretty much bunched them up in order to get that road through. So those lots are still able to fit the required building envelope for a dwelling on that site. As we looked at last time, they're orientated east-west on the long axis, which means your overshadowing impact still is going to be an issue. But even with the lots being tightened up somewhat, you can still get a compliant dwelling on that site.
Somewhat. How much is it reduced each block size?
So if I remember correctly, I'll go back to the original plan. So the original plan had the narrower titles being around 17.3 metres, reading those. So they're now going down to 15.7 at there, as 15 is the narrowest one there. So look, 15 metre wide block, that's certainly narrow. It's not the narrowest that I've considered in my professional career. But certainly a dwelling could be developed on that site. And again, with all the lots that are proposed as part of this subdivision, obviously some lots are going to be conducive to other types of dwelling development than others. Some are realistically going to be suited more to a smaller single-storey, smaller dwelling. Some might be able to facilitate larger, potentially double-storey dwelling. So, but again, with the lots being narrowed somewhat, to use my language, it still provides a compliant building envelope. So even if these lots were proposed as they are, it's effectively the same assessment and recommendation that I would provide it to you if that was provided in the first instance. So in summary, we've got amended plans received as per the original conditions of approval. We've got the new Western Road link to the Dorling land as requested. We've got a revised location for the substation, electricity substation in the middle of the site. We have a request to amend the permit for a Part 5 agreement to be entered into between council and the developer for the council-owned land that adjoins the eastern part of the site. And we've got some requests for covenants to be included.
Thank you, Andrew. Extensive report and presentation and explanation, which is greatly appreciated. I wonder if the move and seconder have any further questions? No? Around the table? No. Again, I think the outcome, particularly that access road to the so-called Dorling land, is a good outcome from a town planning perspective. And full credit to the team for negotiating that, a much better outcome. Thank you, Andrew, again for your work, and I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye. Those
against? The motion is carried. Again, really appreciate that, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, Jono, if you would please ask council to come back in. So our next agenda item is item 10.3, which is that council cease to act as a planning authority. We have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Sims and Councillor Wicks as seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Our next item on our agenda, councillors, comes from the Development and Regulatory Services Department. And we'll consider 11.1, the Building Department report for April 2025. Recommendation there. Is there a mover and second? Councillor Sims. Surprise, surprise. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Fiddler. Thank you. Councillor Sims.
Disappointed with only 13 building and plumbing applications for this last month. So well down.
True.
Back on the 25.
Councillor Fiddler. Nothing?
Nothing further.
Any other queries, questions, observations? Nope. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried and that report is now received. 11.2 is the Planning Development Application Status Report for April 2025, with a recommendation that the report be received. A mover and seconder, please, to reflect that recommendation.
Okay.
Councillor Sims and Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Sims. No comment. Councillor Fiddler.
Nothing further. It's all detailed in the report.
Anything from councillors? No, but I will ask our Manager of Regulatory Services, Jan Phoebe, to comment.
Yes, I'd just like councillors to note DA number 4 of 2025, 23 Bundara Drive. It's greyed out stating approved. It should actually say withdrawn. We've received a fresh application which hasn't yet been determined.
Okay,
Number 4 has been withdrawn.
so that's in that supporting documentation.
Yes.
Thank you. Don't think we need any consent to add to that recommendation and motion. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is from the Office of the General Manager, no less. No? My mistake. It's actually from Corporate and Business Services Department. It is the finance report for April 2025. Report author is Andrew Koch. Report's been provided for council's consideration. And we have we have a recommendation that the finance report be received. A mover and second, Councillor Fiddler, thank you. And Councillor Brown, thank you. Any comments?
No, nothing for me. It's all pretty clear in the report there, which is attached.
Yeah, very much appreciate the clarity. Councillor Brown. Councillors around the table. Councillor Martin to start with.
The only thing I wanted to ask, if they explained the difference in the rates outstanding, I know I asked this last time, but from where we were this time last year to where we are now, it's about $500,000 difference. I just wanted to understand why. And if it is, are people struggling to pay their rates?
So we'll take that on notice. Yes or no, General Manager?
Well, I can answer the question about the $500,000. Obviously, we put out more rates, so it is going to be a higher balance. The percentage outstanding certainly haven't had anything from an overwhelming perspective suggesting people are challenged by the repayment of rates or payment of rates. I can certainly get some information to share more fully with councillors in the next meeting if there is any concern in that respect, but there certainly isn't anything coming to my attention.
Okay. So it generally reflects the increase in actual rates.
Yeah.
Rather than, and the percentage is consistent across the 2 financial years.
Yeah. I'd sort of reflect.
It's not a big difference. It's
No.
just the dollar value is quite large, and if people are,
If there's an underlying trend of concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the General Manager can.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, if you are getting any feedback from community about it, largely there is obviously the provisions of our hardship policy for people to be able to connect with us and the finance team to be able to work through that process. So if you are indeed getting any of that feedback yourself, then feel free to pass on that information and reference our policy.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Mead.
I wanted to a degree make a comment but ask a question with regard to our CapEx reporting, which is good. But the traffic light system does highlight obviously a lot of red. The budget is one that stands out as a continual challenge for us to work within budget based on the escalation of costs over the last few years, as well as time. So I suppose it's just highlighting that continual challenge we have to be able to bring forward our costs and understand when we're setting the budget that things would have changed over a period of time from what we may initially have thought, and to manage that timeline. But the traffic lights is really good for us to go through and understand what is happening. And other than the fact it'd be great if we could fit it on one screen and read it easily, it's certainly a step forward for us to understand what's going on.
Thanks for the feedback. And as we've talked in past meetings, the maturity that we're sort of improving in this particular area continues to get better and better each quarter. We've been pretty clinical around the traffic lighting, just some of our planned timelines at the beginning of the year we haven't been able to meet. Some of that has largely been because of staff vacancies in some of the project areas. Some of it's been about getting through procurement in a timely fashion as well. So there's been plenty of lessons for us to again improve the delivery in 25, 26. But yeah, appreciate the feedback around the reporting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope. If not, for the motion, all those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. 13.2 is the credit card policy put together by Cameron Parsons, our Manager of Corporate and Business Services. Discussed previously and now formally coming before the Council for consideration with a recommendation that the report by the Manager of Corporate and Business Services concerning credit card policy be received and the credit card policy as amended is approved by Council. Can we have someone please move the motion to reflect that? Councillor Brown has, and Councillor Fiedler has seconded that. Long time coming, this one, I would suggest.
I've read through it and I like it. Yeah, it's an easy way to do business.
And consistency with other councils, as is reflected in the report.
A lot of other stuff.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Councillor Fiedler.
Likewise.
Okay, now some questions all around the table. No? Happy? Therefore, I'll put to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That is carried. I want to thank Cameron for the work that's been done there. Bring us into the... Yeah, it's like... Anyway.
I think even credit cards are becoming sort of old technology, but anyway, we are.
True. Anyway, next, again, 13.3 is the schedule of fees and charges for 2025-26. Report put together by our team leader of finance, Andrew Koch, with recommendations. Clearly for councillors' consideration, do we have a mover and seconder to reflect that recommendation, please, councillors? Councillor Martin as the mover and seconder. Councillor Fiedler, thank you. Councillor Martin.
No, nothing to add.
Again, been workshopped, I believe. Councillor Fiedler? Nope. Councillors around the table?
This one actually doesn't show the movement from last financial year to this one. I know we've workshopped it,
Yeah.
However, it does make it difficult for us to go back and reflect on some of those changes.
Yep.
A lot of it is bringing things up to current and making sure we cost recover as well in some of those areas. So I understand that, but there was, and I'm losing my note, there was one I was going to make comment on, wasn't to make an amendment though.
Okay.
But there are changes that will have an impact on people. For example, I think there was a fee, $20 fee, that's what I was going to ask, which was to do with the environmental charges for accommodation, wastewater and whatnot. So therefore, if you were late paying, there's a standard $20 fee. And I was going to ask if that's in line with other processes. So normally if you pay an interest, you'll get charged overdue interest or some such, but in this case, it's a standard $20 fee if you don't pay that on time.
Happy to respond, Mr. Phoebe.
We've introduced this year, but we also do have a late fee for dog registrations. For those late registration, it costs us significantly more than $20 to chase those licences. Yeah. So we're just hoping that it creates a bigger incentive for people to pay on time. Also, always happy if there needs to be, you know, if there are extenuating circumstances, that if we know beforehand, before the due date, and that's still an option to enter into some arrangement with that particular owner.
Thank you. I think the most important thing is how we communicate that we've made that change.
The renewal invoice that goes out, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any queries or questions? No, if not, put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Motion is carried, thank you. Next is from the Infrastructure and Assets Department, if I'm not mistaken, where we have agenda item 14.1, the Port Royal Main Road Council property. Report authored by Jonathan Magel, our Manager of Infrastructure and Assets. Detailed report, recommendations, mover and seconder if we could. Thank you, Councillor Sims. Seconder, Councillor Fiddler. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Sims.
Well, as we discussed at our workshop, I'll endorse the recommendation put forward to demolish all buildings located at 1317 Port Sorrel Road, Port Sorrel, not Sorrel.
Oh, thank you for that. We'll see an amendment to the minutes to reflect that, I would think. Thank you, Councillor Sims. Queries or questions, contributions? Straightforward. Bit of work done at the workshop, but understanding the recommendation by the team. Nothing?
Well,
Councillor Deputy Mayor Mead.
it's well laid out, but there is a cost count that we can't take lightly, as well as understanding the impact and how it's perceived. And I think that's the important thing to talk about, you know, the challenges around the building and the occupancy and the overall intent, which is strategic around changing the use at the moment for that land. So it is a difficult one because we are absorbing a cost to that, including up to 37,000, I think it was, for possible demolition.
And then there's an impact on depreciation that needs to be captured. Some would call it a book entry. But again, yeah, the recommendation certainly covers off on the budget amendment that's associated with that, with the proposal to demolish that building. Again, take on board the Deputy Mayor's comments around the strategic use of that site. But also in the report, it clearly identifies the cost of bringing that up to standard to current day rental accommodation, almost like building a new house basically with the items identified. Thanks to the team for the work they've done on that. Any other questions, contributions? Councillor Brown.
It seems a pity that you would destroy something like that when we've got people who have got nowhere to live.
Yeah, but again, the cost of bringing...
Which is about upgrading it to BC. Just a pity, that's all.
I understand the sentiment, absolutely. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is 16.1, which is the council workshops, with a recommendation that the information on topics discussed at the 12th of May 2025 council workshop be received. Move and seconder if we could, please, councillors. That's Councillor Fiddler and Councillor Wicks. Any comments? No? Councillor Wicks, happy?
Happy.
Thank you. Anybody else in relation to that item? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. 16.2 is the delegates report from both the Deputy Mayor and myself. Recommendation that that report be received and noted. Mover and seconder if we could, please. Councillor Sims, thank you. Councillor Brown. Any queries or questions, councillors? Councillor Sims, happy? Councillor Brown? Thank you. Queries or questions, councillors?
Just that, thank you for the amount of work you both do. Well, every month, but there's quite a bit there from the last month, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fiddler. If there's nothing else, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 16.3 is the council decision status report for April. The recommendation that that report be received. And mover and seconder, if we could, please. Councillor Martin as mover. Seconder is Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Martin.
Nothing, it's all straightforward.
Straightforward. Councillor Fiddler, likewise. Queries or questions? Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. 16.4 is the Moriarty Westvale Sassafras Community Information Evening held on the 3rd of April and the minutes thereof. For the recommendation that those minutes be received. Moved and seconded, if we could, please. Councillor Brown and Deputy Mayor Mead. Councillor Brown. Deputy Mayor Fiddler. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Fiddler. Forgive me.
One day.
Take a deep breath. That's seething. It couldn't last, could it? Deputy Mayor Mead.
I'll top it up for you.
While you take a breather, I will thank council for going to Moriarty to have a community meeting there, and I have received feedback. It was appreciated, and also other people from the area would like to have attended but unable to, which does demonstrate an interest when we go out into some of those areas that people do want to hear and connect. Thank you.
It's nice to have it in a council asset too, and to get appreciation of that asset and the work the whole committee does out there. So, yeah,
And it's a great little hall.
it is a community hub as such. So, yeah, thank you for those comments. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Similarly, 16.5 is the Latrobe Tarleton Community Information Evening and the minutes associated therewith. Move and seconder, if we could, please. Councillor Fiddler, thank you, and Deputy Mayor Mead. Thank you. Comments? Deputy Mayor? Nothing? Around the table? Nope. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next is the 17.1, the Latrobe Sport and Rec Management Committee meeting held on the 30th of April, and the minutes which are recommended to be received. If we could, a motion, please. Councillor Brown, Councillor Fiddler. Councillor Brown, any comments to add further to the...
I've got to read if there's any question.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fiddler. Around the table, Deputy Mayor Mead has her pen in the air.
Thank you. We had spoken previously about the action item for the computer for the scoreboard. So that's exciting to see that that's in and working.
The computer provided to the Cricket Club for the scoreboard.
All are very happy with that. So thank you. That's good news. I do note that I think it was Sassafras Cricket Club again spoke about a portable change room. So, and to talk about the challenges there. So there wasn't an action item, but I assume that'll come out as part of further strategic discussions. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, we're looking to do our master planning Q1, so we'll explore some of those things.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question and make a comment around security checks, because we also had security, of course, going around the youth centre. So we perhaps need to check if there's been any changes in that area, noting what was in the minutes with regard to security checks around this facility. And we were aware because, we'd always see the little pieces of paper left behind. So can we have that followed up?
Yeah.
I'm not sure who has carriage of that, but the minutes indicate that we did have security, which has since been cancelled or discontinued. Again, if we could provide some clarity to elected members around that, that would be appreciated at both the recreation ground and the youth centre. That's the reflection coming out of the meeting anyway.
Yeah.
Anything else out of those minutes?
I thought you might make the final comment.
I thought you might, Deputy Mayor.
Still the fun.
So whilst we are a little jovial about it, in the report from Latrobe Football Club, I think it's very appropriate to highlight that the club reported that on July 5th, if my memory serves me correctly, there will be an interstate football game played between Queensland and Tasmania at both women's and men's senior level at the Latrobe Recreation Ground. That is an achievement. That game could have been held at any ground in Tasmania, but it's not. It's being held at Latrobe. That is my understanding from the minutes, and I have no reason to doubt that. But that is a real testament to the team, Michael particularly, who undertake the work on our behalf, but also to all those involved in the project to enhance the change rooms and the playing surface up at the ground. It's a wonderful testament to a long-held commitment by this council to improve those facilities. So kudos, and I'd like to see a great council representation at that game. Not on the playing field, but observing. So yeah, I think that really needs to be celebrated. That's and adds to the WBBL matches that were held there. There was a national under-17 carnival, partly hosted at the ground as well, cricket carnival, I should say, just in the past summer. So we're really punching above our weight in the events that are attracted to that recreation precinct. So yeah, great outcome.
Good job.
Apart from that, if there's no other comments, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And those against? That motion is carried. And if I'm not mistaken, Sarah, next is item 20, that we now go into closed session with a list of items to be discussed there. Can we have a mover and seconder to that effect, please? Councillor Martin, thank you. Councillor Wicks, thank you. All those in favour? Those against?
Bless you.
Vote against. Motion is carried unanimously, I think. Thank you. And before we get to lighthearted, we'll wait until Sarah advises of the closing of the recording, at which time we'll then take probably 2 minutes, if councillors are happy, just have a break, gather our thoughts, recover from that faux pas, and yeah,